you have a girlfriend?
I do have a girlfriend.
We're almost done. You would get weird then.
Weird.
If we fucked.
Elliot thinks he has landed the opportunity of a lifetime, working for Erica Tracy, an artist who seems to possess everything he lacks: confidence, power, and certainty about what she wants. Erica Tracy, a celebrated artist played by Olivia Wilde, hires him as her assistant and then recasts him as her muse, her submissive, and her experiment. Cooper Hoffman gives Elliot the eagerness of a young man who believes surrender might make him interesting. But the film seems to be asking a thornier question. When desire unfolds inside an unequal relationship, where does liberation end and manipulation begin? Welcome to Break It Down, where we don't just review films, we diagnose them. Every character you've ever watched on screen, they have a condition. And we're here to name it, unpack it, and show you exactly how it plays out in the story. Think of us as the shrinks Hollywood never hired. Welcome to the couch. And Iraqi is clearly enjoying the discomfort built into that question. Erica is not presented as a conventional seductress who merely enters Elliot's life and creates chaos. She is his employer, his cultural superior, and, almost immediately, the person who decides what version of him is worth noticing. She does not simply invite Elliot into her world, she assigns him a role within it. For a young man who appears unsure of his career, his relationships, and even his own appeal, that kind of attention can feel less like exploitation and more like rescue. This is what makes their arrangement psychologically interesting. Elliot is not being forced into something he openly rejects. He is fascinated by Erica. He wants her approval, and he seems thrilled by the possibility that she sees something in him that nobody else has recognized. But wanting an experience does not automatically make the power surrounding it equal. Erica controls his employment, introduces the rules, determines the pace, and possesses the confidence to name his desires before he can articulate them himself. Elliot may consent to becoming her submissive, but he is doing so inside a relationship she has designed almost entirely on her terms. Olivia Wilde appears perfectly cast for this contradiction. Her Erica is glamorous, funny, intimidating, and just self-aware enough to make her behavior seem deliberate rather than reckless. She understands the effect she has on Elliot and does not pretend otherwise. There is also something theatrical about her authority. As an artist, she is already accustomed to turning people, bodies, and private experiences into material. Elliot is therefore not only her employee or lover, he is something she can interpret, reshape, and possibly exhibit. Her interest gives him importance, but it may also reduce him to another object inside her creative universe. Cooper Hoffman, meanwhile, has a face that naturally reveals uncertainty. Even when Elliot appears excited, there is a slight delay in his reactions, as though he is checking Erica's expression before deciding how he feels. That quality matters because Elliot's passivity is not presented as simple weakness. It is closer to what psychologists sometimes describe as identity diffusion, a state in which a person has not formed a stable sense of who they are or what they want. Such people are not empty, but they can become unusually vulnerable to stronger personalities who offer them a ready-made identity. Erica gives Elliot exactly that. With her, he no longer has to be an aimless young assistant trying to become interesting. He can be the chosen muse of a celebrated artist. He can become daring because she calls him daring, desirable because she desires him, and liberated because she has defined liberation for him. The danger is that this transformation remains dependent on her attention. If Erica withdraws her approval, Elliot may not merely lose a relationship, he may lose the version of himself that the relationship created. There is a generational joke running through all of this. Erica belongs to a world that treats sexual experimentation as rebellion, while Elliot comes from a generation trained to discuss desire through boundaries, labels, emotional safety, and the language of consent. The film seems ready to tease both positions. Elliot's caution can look timid and overanalyzed, but Erica's supposedly fearless freedom can also become a convenient excuse for ignoring consequences. One generation may be afraid of surrendering control. The other may have romanticized surrender so completely that it refuses to recognize coercion when it arrives wearing good clothes and speaking confidently. Iraqi does not appear interested in resolving this conflict through a neat moral lesson. Erica may genuinely open Elliot's mind while also exploiting his uncertainty. Elliot may experience real pleasure while gradually surrendering more agency than he understands. These truths do not cancel each other out. In fact, the film's most uncomfortable idea may be that manipulation does not always feel unpleasant while it is happening. Sometimes it feels flattering, sometimes it resembles mentorship. And sometimes the person crossing your boundaries is also the person who taught you that those boundaries could be questioned. Visually, the film does not treat any of this with the somber restraint of a traditional psychological drama. The colors are aggressive, the performance is heightened, and the art world appears deliberately ridiculous. Erica's environment is filled with people who have learned to turn provocation into status. In such a world, almost any violation can be defended as experimentation, and any objection can be dismissed as repression. This allows the comedy to do something useful. It makes Erica's world seductive, while quietly exposing how self-serving its language can be. Then the murder mystery enters, pushing Elliot's private confusion into something much more dangerous. What began as an erotic arrangement appears to expand into betrayal, suspicion, and a crime scene. This tonal shift may sound excessive, but it fits the psychology of the story. To Elliot, Erica does not simply complicate his romantic life. She overturns his entire understanding of consequence. By the time detectives become involved, the question is no longer whether he went too far. It is whether he ever understood where too far was. And perhaps that is the real seduction at the center of I Want Your Sex. Erica does not merely offer Elliot pleasure. She offers him relief from uncertainty. She tells him who to become, what to desire, and how far to follow her. For someone without a firm identity, being controlled can briefly feel like being understood. But the more completely Elliot enters her world, the harder it becomes to tell whether he is finally expressing himself or simply performing the person Erica wants him to be. That performance, of course, is not entirely Elliot's invention. Erica is directing it, and because she is an artist, direction comes. The gender reversal makes this even more provocative. Audiences are accustomed to stories about powerful older men taking an interest in inexperienced younger women. We recognize the imbalance almost immediately because cinema, workplaces, and real life have trained us to recognize it. But place an older woman in control and a younger man in submission, and the arrangement is often treated as comic, enviable, or even therapeutic. Elliot is expected to feel lucky. His confusion becomes part of the joke because men are not supposed to be destabilized by receiving actual attention from an attractive woman. Power does not disappear simply because the person possessing it is female. Nor does vulnerability become impossible because the vulnerable person is male. Elliot's apparent willingness may make the situation more complicated, but it does not make Erica's authority irrelevant. The film seems to understand that reversing a familiar dynamic does more than update it. It exposes how differently we judge the same behavior depending on who is controlling whom. Charlie XCX's Minerva adds another layer to this tension. As Elliot's girlfriend, she represents the life he already has a relationship that may be imperfect and comparatively ordinary, but one in which he is known outside Erica's fantasy. Erica offers intensity, transformation, and the intoxicating feeling of being selected. Minerva is connected to continuity, responsibility, and the less glamorous work of being accountable to another person. Elliot's attraction to Erica may therefore have as much to do with escaping his existing identity as it does with sex. This is often how obsession begins. The obsessive person is not always attached only to another human being. They become attached to the self they are allowed to inhabit around that person. Elliot may believe he cannot walk away from Erica because she is irresistible. The more unsettling possibility is that he cannot walk away, because without her, he would have to return to being uncertain about himself. Naturally to her. She looks at people and sees not only who they are, but what they might become, under the correct lighting, costume, pressure, or command. This is useful in a studio. It is considerably more dangerous in an intimate relationship. Erica's mistake may be that she cannot always distinguish between discovering something in another person and manufacturing it herself. There is a narcissistic quality to this, though not necessarily in the obvious sense of vanity. Erica does not merely want to be admired, she wants to be transformative. She needs to believe that entering someone's life changes its temperature, its vocabulary, perhaps even its direction. Elliot is attractive to her partly because he is unfinished. His uncertainty gives her space to leave a mark. A more self-assured person might desire Erica without allowing her to define the entire experience. Elliot, however, arrives with enough blank space for her to confuse influence with authorship. This is where the language of being someone's muse becomes slightly suspect. It sounds flattering because art has taught us to associate the muse with beauty, inspiration, and immortality. But a muse is also someone observed from the outside. They inspire the work without necessarily controlling how they are represented within it. By calling Elliot her muse, Erica elevates him and objectifies him in the same gesture. He feels seen, perhaps more intensely than ever before. But being watched with fascination is not the same as being understood.
The art world setting makes this contradiction especially effective. It is a world where exploitation can be renamed collaboration, emotional chaos can become a creative process, and poor behavior is frequently protected by the prestige of the person behaving badly. Erica has cultural power, in addition to professional power, She can make Elliot feel that discomfort is proof of sophistication, and hesitation is merely evidence that he has not yet evolved. If he objects, the problem can easily be reframed as his conventionality rather than her conduct. Greg Araki seems to find this world both intoxicating and absurd. The film's bright colors, exaggerated clothes, provocative artwork, and deliberately excessive sexual energy do not ask us to mistake Erica's environment for ordinary life. This is a fantasy of freedom, built with very expensive furniture. Everyone appears determined to prove that they are less inhibited than the person standing next to them. The result is funny, but it also reveals how quickly rebellion can develop its own rules. Once transgression becomes the social norm, saying no may become the most rebellious act available. Elliot does not yet seem equipped to recognize that. He is learning a new language, and Erica is both his teacher and the person grading him. This creates what could be called an asymmetry of interpretation. Erica always seems to know what their experiences mean. She can label something liberating, artistic, playful, or necessary before Elliot has processed it. He is left reacting not only to what happened, but to the explanation she has already supplied. The person who controls the meaning of an experience often controls its emotional aftermath as well. Minerva's presence complicates that control. It would be easy to write Elliot's girlfriend as simply uptight, the humorless obstacle standing between a young man and his awakening. The trailer certainly appears willing to play with that image. But Minerva may also be the only person positioned to ask whether Elliot's transformation is actually making him freer. To Erica, his old life represents repression. To Minerva, Erica may look less like liberation and more like a glamorous adult taking advantage of someone who is desperate to feel exceptional. And Minerva has reasons to be angry that go beyond jealousy. Elliot is not exploring desire in a vacuum. His self-discovery has consequences for people who did not agree to participate in it. Films about awakening often become so enchanted by the protagonist's newfound freedom that they treat everyone hurt along the way as emotionally inconvenient. But freedom without responsibility is not maturity. It is simply appetite with better public relations. Apple, Elliot's roommate, seems to occupy another corner of this argument. If Minerva represents boundaries and Erica represents excess, Apple appears connected to repression, the desires, frustrations, and resentments people bury until they emerge in less manageable forms. Her presence suggests that silence is not necessarily healthier than indulgence. The film is not offering a simple choice between Erica's fearlessness and Minerva's caution. It is surrounding Elliot with different ways of managing desire, each with its own blind spots. This is important because Araki's real target may not be sex at all. It may be the stories people tell themselves to avoid confronting what they are doing. Erica calls control liberation. Elliot calls dependence discovery. Minerva may call fear responsibility. Apple may call repression stability. Each character possesses language sophisticated enough to defend their behavior. The mystery lies in whether any of them can recognize the emotional need hiding beneath that language. For Erica, the need appears to be dominance, but dominance is rarely only about enjoying authority. Control can also be a defense against vulnerability. If Erica determines the rules, she never has to wait helplessly for someone else to choose her. If she turns intimacy into a performance, she can remain its director instead of becoming an exposed participant. She can demand surrender without offering the same uncertainty in return. What looks like absolute confidence may therefore be a carefully maintained arrangement designed to prevent emotional equality. Elliot's surrender serves both of them. He is relieved of the burden of knowing what he wants, while Erica is protected from the risk of dealing with someone whose desires might contradict her own. Their arrangement feels complementary because each person's weakness temporarily solves the other person's problem. This is why unhealthy relationships can feel unusually intense. They do not begin by exposing our wounds. They begin by fitting them. But that fit cannot remain comfortable forever. Elliot's identity may be uncertain, but it is not non-existent. Eventually, the object begins interpreting the artist. The muse develops demands. The submissive discovers that surrender can be withdrawn. And for someone like Erica, who has built her authority on always being one psychological step ahead, Elliot's independence may feel less like growth and more like betrayal. This is where the thriller element becomes more than a decorative change of genre. The apparent crime and the arrival of detectives turn private behavior into evidence. Suddenly, every flirtation, secret, performance, and lie can be examined from the outside. Erica's preferred interpretation is no longer the only one available. The story moves from the seductive question of what Elliot wants to the more practical question of what actually happened. Johnny Knoxville and Margaret Cho's detectives appear to bring a knowingly comic energy to this investigation, which is probably wise. A solemn procedural might crush the film's campier pleasures. But their presence also creates distance. Elliot and Erica have spent so much time inside a private world of coded desires that ordinary questions begin to feel strangely clarifying. Who had power? Who was lying? Who benefited? Who was harmed? The answers may be less glamorous than the language used to disguise them. There is also a delicious irony in an artist who controls images, potentially losing control of her own narrative. Erica understands presentation. She knows how to turn scandal into mystique and provocation into publicity. But a murder investigation is an environment in which other people construct the story. Detectives gather fragments, witnesses provide competing versions, and Elliot may finally become more than the beautiful young man positioned inside Erica's frame. The film's success will depend on whether it allows Erica to remain contradictory. If she becomes only a predator, the psychological tension disappears. If she is treated only as a liberator, the power imbalance becomes decoration. What makes her compelling is the possibility that she is both sincere and selfish, that she genuinely believes she is freeing Elliot while arranging that freedom around her own needs. The same generosity must be extended to Elliot. He cannot simply be an innocent, corrupted by a sophisticated woman. His attraction matters. His dishonesty matters. His willingness to use Erica as an escape from Minerva and from himself matters. Vulnerability may explain why he enters the arrangement, but it does not remove his responsibility for what he does inside it. And that seems to be where I Want Your Sex becomes more interesting than its deliberately provocative title. The title sounds direct, almost uncomplicated, but wanting someone is perhaps the simplest part of this story. The trouble begins with everything attached to that want: the need to be chosen, the pleasure of being transformed, the fear of becoming ordinary again, and the stories we invent so that surrender feels like freedom. Freedom is an attractive word precisely because it can conceal so many motives. Erica can describe her world as a place without shame, but the absence of shame does not automatically produce honesty. A person can be unapologetic and still be dishonest with themselves. In Erica's case, sexual confidence may be genuine, but it also seems to function as a kind of armor. She is comfortable exposing her body because the more difficult exposure would involve admitting that she needs something she cannot command. Elliot's predicament is almost the reverse. He is physically available, but psychologically difficult to locate. He follows, reacts, and adapts. His uncertainty makes him appear open-minded, although openness without a stable center can become suggestibility. There is a difference between entering an experience because it expresses something within you and entering it because another person's certainty feels more convincing than your own. Elliot may not recognize that difference until the consequences become impossible to ignore. The film's title is useful here. I Want Your Sex sounds like a declaration of appetite, but the possessive word is doing considerable work. Erica does not merely want sex. She appears to want Elliot's sexuality, his desire, curiosity, embarrassment, and transformation as something she can activate and claim. She wants access not only to his body, but to the meaning he attaches to it. That is a much more intimate form of control. But Araki is too mischievous a filmmaker to turn this into a lecture about healthy relationships. The comedy prevents the characters from becoming case studies. Erica's extravagance is entertaining. Elliot's bewilderment is funny. The detectives seem to belong to a slightly different film, and perhaps that dislocation is intentional. Desire rarely feels as serious while we are pursuing it as it does when we later explain our decisions to someone who is not caught inside the fantasy. That may be the purpose of the murder investigation. It converts impulse into testimony. Elliot may have to describe experiences that once felt thrilling in the flat, chronological language of evidence. When did the relationship begin? Who initiated it? What did Erica promise? What did Elliot conceal? Questions like these strip away atmosphere. They do not necessarily reveal the complete emotional truth, but they expose the distance between what people felt and what they actually did. And everyone in this story seems invested in controlling that distance. Erica turns behavior into art. Elliot turns submission into awakening. Minerva may turn betrayal into proof that she was right to be cautious. Even the surrounding art world appears skilled at transforming ordinary selfishness into theory. The film's humor comes from watching intelligent people produce elaborate explanations for needs that are painfully simple: to be desired, to feel important, to avoid abandonment, or to punish someone before they can reject you. Erica's need to be unforgettable may be especially important. Some people pursue intimacy because they want companionship. Others pursue impact. They measure a relationship by how permanently they altered the other person. For Erica, leaving Elliot unchanged might feel like failure. If he returns to Minerva, resumes his old life, or eventually remembers their affair as an embarrassing detour, then Erica loses the role she values most, the woman who awakened him. This could explain why control becomes so central to her desire. She does not simply want Elliot to enjoy himself. She wants to determine what the enjoyment proves about him. His pleasure confirms her power, her sophistication, and her ability to see through the timid identity he carried into her studio. But if Elliot interprets the experience differently, Erica's carefully constructed story begins to collapse. A muse who claims ownership of his own meaning is no longer a muse. He is a rival author. Elliot, however, is not merely trapped inside Erica's narrative. He benefits from it. Being chosen by her allows him to feel extraordinary without doing the slower work of developing an identity. There is status in being associated with someone powerful, even when the association is destabilizing. He can mistake proximity to Erica's confidence for confidence of his own. This is borrowed self-esteem, and like most borrowed things, it becomes a problem when the owner wants it back. The film also seems alert to the peculiar loneliness of the young people surrounding Erica. Elliot has a girlfriend and a roommate, yet he appears susceptible to the first person who makes him feel newly visible. That is not necessarily because nobody loves him. Familiar love often lacks the narcotic force of unfamiliar attention. Minerva knows the ordinary Elliot, including the indecision and mediocrity he would prefer to escape. Erica sees a fantasy version of him, and for a while, being misread favorably can feel better than being understood accurately. This is why Minerva cannot compete simply by caring more. She represents a reality in which Elliot has responsibilities and a history. Erica represents reinvention without paperwork. Around her, he can behave as if his previous commitments belong to an outdated version of himself. Self-discovery then becomes a convenient moral loophole. If he is becoming someone new, perhaps the old Elliot cannot be held responsible for the damage. Yet growth that requires everyone else to absorb its consequences is not particularly enlightened. Elliot may be inexperienced, confused, and manipulated, but the film should not allow those qualities to cleanse him of accountability. He can be vulnerable to Erica and cruel to Minerva at the same time. One of the more honest things a story can do is refuse to arrange its characters neatly into those who harm and those who are harmed. Most intimate disasters involve people moving between both positions. The treatment of Elliot's masculinity could determine how sharply the film lands. A younger man, dominated by an older woman, is often presented as having achieved a universal male fantasy. If he feels anxious, used, or emotionally overwhelmed, he risks appearing ungrateful. This expectation makes his vulnerability difficult to express, because the culture has already decided that pleasure should cancel discomfort. But a person can desire an encounter, enjoy parts of it, and still emerge from it psychologically injured. That complexity is essential to any serious discussion of consent. Consent is not a magical word that makes every surrounding condition irrelevant, nor does an unequal relationship automatically erase a person's ability to choose. The uncomfortable territory lies between those certainties. Elliot can make choices while being influenced by professional dependence, admiration, insecurity, and the fear of disappointing Erica. His yes may be real, but the film asks us to consider everything that helps produce it. Erica's own freedom is equally complicated. A woman expressing sexual authority on screen is still provocative because female desire has so often been framed as something performed for male approval. Erica does not appear interested in being approved of. She wants to establish the terms. There is pleasure in watching a woman occupy that position, without apology. But representation does not require moral innocence. Erica can be culturally refreshing and personally destructive. In fact, allowing her to be both may be more liberating than turning her into a symbol who must behave impeccably. Olivia Wilde appears to understand that Erica's power should be enjoyed before it is judged. If the audience never feels her magnetism, Elliot's decisions seem foolish rather than psychologically credible. We need to understand why he follows her, why her commands feel like recognition, and why conventional life begins to seem colorless beside her. Seduction in this film is not simply erotic, it is aesthetic. Erica offers Elliot entrance into a world that looks louder, smarter, and more alive than his own. The danger is that intensity can impersonate meaning. A relationship filled with secrecy, risk, spectacle, and emotional volatility will naturally feel significant because it occupies so much mental space. Elliot may interpret his obsession as evidence that Erica is uniquely important, but obsession does not measure compatibility. It measures preoccupation. The nervous system can become attached to uncertainty, especially when affection and withdrawal arrive unpredictably. What feels like passion may partly be the body waiting for its next reward. By placing a mystery around this relationship, Araki appears to externalize that uncertainty. Elliot is not only trying to understand Erica, he may be trying to reconstruct himself. Which parts of the experience did he choose? Which were suggested to him? When did excitement become fear? And why is it often easier to recognize manipulation after the person controlling us is no longer present to explain it away? These are heavier questions than the film's candy-colored surfaces initially promise, but that contrast may be its point. I Want Your Sex dresses psychological danger as a party, because danger rarely announces itself in the language of danger. Sometimes it arrives as opportunity. Sometimes it calls itself art. Sometimes it tells an uncertain young man that surrendering his judgment is the first honest choice he has ever made. I Want Your Sex asks not whether Erica is good or bad, but why Elliot needs her authority to feel alive. She gives him permission to explore desire, but that permission comes with a price, the surrender of his own interpretation. This is where Greg Araki's provocation becomes more than shock. The film suggests that liberation and manipulation can occupy the same relationship, and that pleasure does not automatically erase power. Whether the murder mystery sharpens these ideas or simply adds stylish chaos will depend on how convincingly the film brings its many tones together. But Olivia Wilde's commanding Erica and Cooper Hoffman's uncertain Elliot create a dynamic worth examining. She wants to transform him. He wants to escape himself. And somewhere between those two desires, intimacy becomes a struggle over authorship. Perhaps that is the film's most unsettling idea. We are often drawn to people who appear to know us better than we know ourselves, but being defined by someone is not the same as being understood by them. If you enjoy psychological film breakdowns like this, subscribe to Break It Down. We release 3 new videos every week. Until next time, keep watching closely. The mind always leaves clues.